Well, bore da pawb, shwmae, sut ydych chi? How are you all? Today, I've got a book about a very eccentric old lady. Now, eccentric, I suppose, is a little bit quirky. She does some odd things, and her name is Mrs. Armitage, and we're going to find out what odd things she does. But first, we're going to start with our good morning song. Barod, un, dau, tri. Bore da, sut o'i ti, bendy gedig, bore da. Now, this book is written and illustrated by Quentin Blake. And Mrs. Richards used to love Roald Dahl books. And lots of Roald Dahl's books were illustrated by Quentin Blake. He's quite a famous illustrator. And this one is called Mrs. Armitage on Wheels. Barod. Mrs. Armitage was out on her bicycle. Breakspear the dog ran alongside. A hedgehog walked across the road. Tring, tring went Mrs. Armitage on the bell. Do you know what this bike really needs, said Mrs. Armitage to herself, is a really loud horn. Because I don't think she thinks her bicycle bell is very loud. Mrs. Armitage bought 3 horns. They were all very loud. Beep, beep, honk, honk, pap, pap, went Mrs. Armitage on the horns. Look at these poor old ladies. They've just jumped out of their skins, haven't they? Then the chain came off. By the time Mrs. Armitage had got on it again, her hands were all black and greasy. Oh, do you know what this bike needs, said Mrs. Armitage to herself, is somewhere to wash your hands. Now, I've never seen a bike with somewhere to wash your hands. So she got a bucket of water and a towel and a soap rack with a bar of soap, and she hung them all on her bike, and off she went with beautifully clean hands. What this bike needs, said Mrs. Armitage to herself as she cycled along, if it's to be looked after properly, is a complete toolkit. Oh my gosh, I think she could have got a smaller toolkit than that. So she got a toolbox with spanners and screwdrivers and hammers and cans of penetrating oil, and she fixed it onto the back of her bicycle, and off she went. By now, Mrs. Armitage was beginning to think about food. Do you know, what this bike needs, said Mrs. Armitage to herself, is somewhere to carry a light snack. So she got a tray for apples and bananas and cheese and tomato sandwiches, and a holder for a bottle of lemonade and a flask of cocoa, and a special basket for bones and dog biscuits for Breakspear, and she fixed them all to the bike, and off they went. Whoa, this bike is getting very full. But by now, poor Breakspear was feeling quite tired running alongside the bicycle. You could tell because his tongue was hanging out and he was panting. What this bike needs, says Mrs. Armitage to herself, is something for a faithful dog to ride on. So she got some iron brackets and some nuts and bolts and some cushions, and she made a seat for Breakspear, and off they went. He looks very comfy. They had stopped beside the road for some sandwiches and dog biscuits when it began to rain. Great heavens, said Mrs. Armitage. What this bike needs, Breakspear, is something to keep the rain off. So she got 2 umbrellas, one large, one small, and she fixed them onto the bicycles, and off they went. Riding through the rain, Mrs. Armitage began to feel rather downhearted. What this bike needs, said Mrs. Armitage to herself, is a bit of cheerful music. So she got a transistor radio cassette player and a lot of cassettes of cheerful music and a mouth organ so that she could join in, and she fixed them all to the bike, and off they went. Mrs. Armitage was turning the pedals so fast and blowing the mouth organ so hard that soon she was nearly exhausted. What this bike needs, says Mrs. Armitage to herself, is a bit of extra oomph. I think what this bike needs is less stuff on it. So she got some wood and some ropes and some tarpaulin. She rigged up a mast and a sail, and she added a few yards of bunting and an anchor into the bargain. This is just silly. She's been a bit ridiculous now, isn't she? And off they went with the wind behind them, faster and faster and faster, until... Crash, crunch, clang, clatter, thud. Pap, pap. poor old Breakspear the dog. What this bike needs, Breakspear, says Mrs. Armitage as she picked herself up from the wreckage, is taken to the dump. Whose fault is that? All her fault, isn't it? And what I need is... what's she got now? Roller skates. Whoopee! And Breakspear the dog is on the back. But what these roller skates need, says Mrs. Armitage to herself, what these roller skates need is... I wonder, what do you think those roller skates need? I think, knowing what she was like on a bike, she needs a big pillow wrapped around her in case she falls over, doesn't she? Now, Mrs. Richards and her husband like going out on bikes, on mountain bikes and road bikes. And I can't see Mr. Richards letting me put any of this stuff on my bike, because I don't go very fast on it as it is. And if I added any more extra weight to it, the wheels wouldn't turn around. I hope you have a lovely day. Let's do our goodbye song. Barod, 1, 2, 3. Hwyl fawr ffrindiau, hwyl fawr ffrindiau, hwyl fawr ffrindiau, mae'n amser dweud hwyl fawr. Twralwra bantynni, 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 twralwra bantynni, mae'n amser dweud hwyl fawr. See you tomorrow.